Welcome to the We Wonder podcast. I'm Jason Schlachter, your host, and this is a podcast where we focus on science, technology, and how it interacts with society by interviewing people with interesting perspectives on the world where those three things intersect. So very excited to be here with you all. A little bit about myself. I lead artificial intelligence strategy for a Fortune 500 company, and I have a background in artificial intelligence research. I have a background in doing that for the military and other domains. And right now, I'm much more focused on the business side of things. How do we build programs of engagement around artificial intelligence across a wide range of industries? How do we generate value? And sort of what are the ethical concerns in doing that? What kind of societal implications could there be? Which companies are really killing it and we should be investing in, acquiring. Those are the kind of things I do in my day-to-day job. But as the podcast title implies, I wonder about a lot of different things, and that's what's motivating me to start this podcast. So today I'm joined by my friend and colleague and generally very smart guy, Alexei Samoylov. So Alexei, why don't you say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm an AI practitioner at a electronics components company, mostly focused on AI and imaging. But I've been interested in AI for a long time. I finally got my hands on it about 3.5 years ago, and it's been really exciting. It's really awesome to see what deep learning is all about. I'm also an armchair physicist. Don't have tons of technical background in physics, but I love to ponder the universe and some interesting implications of what physics tells us about it, and just kind of trying to envision the future and where we find our place in it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Alexei, for joining us today. I'm extremely excited to have this conversation. And in terms of topics, we have so much to cover that we won't get to all the things that we'd like to talk about, but why don't we start with artificial intelligence? What is AI?
Yeah, that thing.
Keep your answer to under 2 hours, please.
AI has been redefined probably 40 different times throughout the years, right? I mean, I think back in the 1980, researchers came out and said, hey, in 10 years, we're going to have AI. And every 10 years it's been repeating itself. So every time it's kind of been redefined of what it implies. Is speech recognition nowadays AI? Is it, or is it just some algorithms in the background? So I think in general, AI would be something that kind of behaves and acts in the way that we do. But there's different levels of AI. There's the special AI, general AI, and then the super AI that will wipe out the universe, or at least us.
Yeah. So can you tell us what is special AI versus general AI?
So special AI is what we have now. It's like the Siri or Google, whatever that is used in one particular domain. So it's trained on lots of data and it's become really good, right? So it'll still have a huge impact, probably as much as the internet itself has had on our society, on everything we do, on technology. Healthcare will benefit hugely, but it'll be still, per domain, an application per domain. So it's not something that thinks for itself, but you give it enough examples and they can tease out interesting details that no human could possibly pick up just because the signal is so small.
Yeah, so it's really good at a specific task, but it has no sort of general sense of intelligence. So it could recognize whether the image has a hot dog in it or not with incredible accuracy. But if you asked it something really simple like is today a good day to go skiing, it could have no idea.
Yeah, and interesting even in that example of hot dog, not hot dog. Let's talk about that for a moment.
See, like critical AI applications that the world needs.
Exactly. The not hot dog portion is the hard one actually, because you can supply the special, the AI with lots of examples of hot dogs, but how do you supply it with examples of not hot dog? It's basically everything else. But
let's not name all the things that are not hot dog in this world. Let's quickly iterate all the things that we're not going to discuss on this podcast. Yeah, so, that is challenging.
So that's where specialized AI still doesn't do well. It doesn't understand anything about the inverse, right? It can only really work with examples of of the things that you give it that you wanted to find.
Okay. And what about generalized AI? How is that in contrast?
Well, generalized AI would be on the level of the human intellect, but if we ever achieve generalized AI, then super AI will be like within a couple of days or hours in the making. So it's kind of a scary thought, but yeah, basically the curve is exponential. So if we ever are so good that we can train a generalized AI, that means within the next couple of days we'll have super AI that will just like destroy the world, or maybe not.
That's really fascinating and kind of scary. Just to walk through what that means for people without an AI background. I mean, effectively what we're saying is that if we build AI that is generally intelligent, the way that a person is generally intelligent, there's one person who's maybe working on AI, and maybe he goes to sleep and he takes breaks to eat and he loses focus. But an AI system never sleeps, never takes breaks, it never loses focus. If you have one of them, you can make 1 billion of them at sort of minimal additional cost, right? It's just compute time. And so in that sense, that kind of AI could invent essentially something the way that a person could invent something that is essentially better than itself. And that's what you're really getting at, I think, right? And that the super AI would then be in a position to do the same and create the super duper AI, and then the uber super duper AI, and just keep adding modifiers to generate, the level of intelligence, right? It's sort of this curve of once you cross the point of getting generalized AI, and you have the ability to make any incremental gain, you're going to very quickly arrive at a ultra smart AI.
And actually, there's already a really good example in the specialized AI domain, right? Where AlphaGo, when it was first trained, it was trained on human games, right? In the game of Go, or even Alpha Chess. When it was first trained, it was trained on human examples of chess. But even though it already was able to beat the best chess player and the best Go player in the world, they turned that around and they figured out a way where it just plays itself without any human input, even to begin with. So you just give it the rules of the game and it starts playing against itself, and then it plays a stronger version of itself against a weaker version of itself, learns from that, and then builds a new stronger version which now plays against the previous strongest version. And so in that respect, it's already in the specialized domain. We can already see how it can build, and we've proven that it can build better versions of itself and just iterate until it is basically unbeatable in the game.
So at what point in this process do we welcome our AI overlords and beg for mercy? How many years away are we from needing to beg for mercy? Are we? I mean, I don't think it's happening in the next 5 or 10 years, but maybe we're 50 to 100 years out from crossing that threshold where effectively, AI is the new intelligent life form on Earth, and they make people look the way that we currently look at chimpanzees, for example. Is that
more like ants?
More like ants. So one of my favorite quotes along the lines of making us look like ants, or maybe bacteria, is from Eliezer Yudkowsky, and I may have told you this in the past, but it goes like this: the AI does not hate you; nor does it love you, but you are made out of atoms, which it can use for something else. So
It's
so
not wrong.
come self-execute so I can use your biomass for, for making paper clips.
That's right. And that's the danger. That's the big danger of AI. Before it ever achieves like general AI, where it can reason about not just its own existence, but also notice the existence of human beings and other intelligent species on Earth, and kind of understand the biology and all of that. Before all of that, if we're not careful, we will create that paperclip making AI that will just convert everything they can to paperclips, because that was its initial task. So if it doesn't have any context, it will just perform its duty flawlessly and wipe out everything.
So for people that are less familiar with the paperclip making AI, a very important use case for AI. Can you like briefly just walk us through that scenario and what that is, and sort of like why people tell that story?
Yeah, I think they tell them that story to scare people away from AI.
It's what I tell my 6-year-old at bedtime.
Yeah, exactly.
To keep him from launching a career in AI when he gets older.
And I think the general story is that something slightly smarter than the specialized AIs we have now is instructed to create a good paperclip, or whatever your version of a good pen. And so it figures out a really great process of making that pen or making that paperclip, and then it decides, oh well, I can make this process even better if I make these other enhancements. It just keeps enhancing itself to make even a better paperclip or make it more efficiently. And eventually it figures out that the only inefficiency left is that it could be powered off by humans, and so it decides, oh well, I gotta get rid of humans, because otherwise I'm not gonna be efficient if they power me off, and so it just then eradicates all humans. So
Yeah.
kind of and continues making paperclips until it turns the whole galaxy into paperclips.
Yeah, I like it. And ironically, it's not making any paper to clip together. It's just
Yeah.
it's just like paper clips without paper.
Yeah, exactly. It's lost on the purpose, the original purpose of the paperclip is completely lost in it, because it's never been instructed in anything but to perform this one task as efficiently as it can.
Yeah, so it really has no concept of the world, and it has no concept of why it's been asked to make paper clips, and it has no concept of the impact of that optimization on other things like human species existence, or human happiness, or anything, or connecting paper together. It just has this optimization function which says make paper clips the best way you can, and in ignorance of sort of general intelligence that helps it understand why it should be making paper clips, and what its sort of overall intent of that goal is. It will just relentlessly optimize without any understanding of the impact of its other actions. Right? That's kind of like almost like the adolescence of AI. It's like in the nuclear age, people were sort of fearful of this nuclear adolescence of like, would we just bomb ourselves into oblivion before we sort of achieve the maturity that we needed to balance that power with our politics and our action. And I'm not claiming that we're through that period.
Yeah,
the risk is still there. Maybe it's going to be the AIs that launch the missiles next time. But I think it's a little bit analogous, right? Like at some point the AI will have incredible power over our energy grids, over our financial systems, over our medical systems. And those things will happen long before it really has an understanding of what those systems are meant to achieve for humanity.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot more dangerous than nukes, because at least nukes can be physically contained.
Way to make a nuclear war seem like a minor issue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, once something like this AI can get out there and self-replicate, well, good luck getting rid of it, right? I mean, it's going to be impossible.
Yeah,
I mean, we can't get rid of botnets that humans create right now. And what are you going to do once the AI is out there?
Yeah,
I mean,
in fact, if you think about the Matrix, like in the Matrix, they if when Morpheus was like talking like Neo through the history of sort of like Earth, like he's like, you're not living in the 20th century, you know, you're living in the 22nd century, and here's what it looks like. And it was like this desolate wasteland. And he's like, we're not sure if it was us or them who scorched the sun or scorched the earth, right? He's like, but we had to do it. It was like an attempt to shut down the AI basically.
Right. Yeah, they created clouds in the sky so it wouldn't get any power from the sun, I guess. That was the premise.
The Sentinels were like, we got better ideas.
Yeah.
Bring us the human batteries. Okay. So, what about this? You know, one thing I thought about a lot, especially with my background in military and intelligence work, is that, you know, AI is increasingly being used in the military, not just the American military, but just generally in defense work. And in my mind, there's this point we're working towards, where, you know, the AI essentially fights for us. That could be taking the form of sort of making decisions about, you know, firing missiles and counter missiles. It could be things like the drones and the planes flying intelligently. Right now, you know, as advanced as drones are, they're effectively manually flown with some very little AI oversight, very little automation. But we're moving towards a point where it's going to be more and more automated. That's already on the roadmap. This is not sort of like hypothetical stuff. You know, we already have it on the roadmap where in the future, we'll have swarms of aircraft that are autonomous, AI controlled, right? And they're seeking out targets and attacking them. And I think that's going to trickle down into troops on the ground too. I think if you imagine the Terminator style, you know, soldier, that's also, I think, bound to happen. And one thing that I've been thinking a lot about is, you know, we should be proactive about, you know, how we think about these things from an ethical perspective. In that, like, do we want to do this? Do we want to have robots, intelligent robots, without a human in the loop? You know, without a commander sort of, you know, looking at the targets and saying yes and no, engaging in battle, and killing people. And what I've come to the conclusion of is that it doesn't really matter what we want, because not every country will be on board with the same level of ethics. So if China or Russia, who you know, are often pushing these kinds of capabilities, if they want to build a killer robot and they want to launch a war against the United States, I mean, do we want to send our soldiers, our children, to go fight against machines and have them dying against machines? Or at some point as a society, we're going to say, you know what, we don't really want that. Like, let's build the machines so that our machines can fight their machines. And then it becomes an arms race to build the best killer machines. And suddenly, you know, we built killer machines, even though maybe we ethically didn't want to. And so that's something I think about a lot. But given your comparison to nuclear war being not that bad, maybe I'm in the weeds and not really thinking about sort of the, you know, once we give hand power over to our AI overlords, maybe none of that stuff really matters.
Hey, I can envision a great scenario though. So imagine, you know, two countries are going to war, and these two super powerful AIs, you know, get together. They simulate the whole war engagement and then shake hands and say, "All right, you win, you lose."
and then they say the only way to win is not to play.
That's right.
Sponsored by Big Whopper.
But basically, I mean, think about it. All the AIs would be doing is, well, whether simulation or real, but in real warfare, they still simulate the actions of the attacker, right, to anticipate how the attacker is going to behave and how they should react. So literally a simulation could be the entire war if you had powerful enough AIs.
You know what, I think that's a fascinating concept, but you know why it doesn't work? It's because we have to blow shit up and we have to kill people.
But not the AIs, they don't have to.
No, they need to. If we're not killing and blowing people up, then we're not fighting a real war. It's not going to work because, I mean, we win wars when we effectively, you know, take away the options of our opponents to further their strategic interests, right? And I mean, we take those we take those interests away by essentially, you know, you know, removing their ability to further those strategic interests by force, right? And prior to war, I mean, countries are trying to further their strategic interests through diplomacy, through economics, through gray zone conflict, which is like the space in between sort of legitimate, economic competition and war, where you're taking actions that aren't really good, but they're not really crossing red lines that lead to war. But once you're in war, it's like I'm furthering my strategic interests through force. So I feel like unless you remove their ability to use force in the absolute, who's going to really agree to simulation? It's kind of going to be like oh man, that was a good game, I lost, but how about best out of three? And you're like, no, we won the war. We did the simulation. Yeah, but I wasn't really ready. My AIs were kind of still learning. And,
well, actually, it could be best out of three, right? Like, you could run through a simulation. Best out of 1,000, right?
So you're gonna Monte Carlo it?
Well, like the current AI chess engines, they all play 100 games.
Yeah.
So
okay, so to jump up a level, since I said Monte Carlo it, we're not talking about going to the casino. We're talking about a method called Monte Carlo, where you when you have systems that are essentially non-deterministic, meaning that you can't guarantee the behaviors they're going to take over time. So like if I had a rule that said every time I flip this light switch, turn on the light, that's a deterministic system. It's the lights go on when I flip the switch. If you have a probabilistic system where there's a probability that things happen, or you have such a complex dynamic system with so many interacting pieces that it's impossible to sort of know from the perspective that we have, exactly what's going to happen. Then I flip the light switch and the light may go on, it may not. It's hard to know. It's not deterministic. It's probabilistic. Maybe I've got an 80% chance the light goes on, kind of almost like a quantum type view. So if you have those kind of systems, and a lot of modern AI does function like that, it is probabilistic. Then Monte Carlo is the idea that you can't really get to the true performance of an AI system by running through it once. So if Alexei and I have an AI battle where our AIs go and fight each other in a simulated war, whether he wins or I wins is not like truly indicative of sort of who has the better AI system. You start to approach on sort of like the global truth as you run like more and more simulations. You start to get a closer representation to like what the population of outcomes could be. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah, I think I usually think of Monte Carlo as like a sampling technique, like when you can't simulate or compute the whole probability, you basically sample out of the population and you get different answers, and you kind of sample enough to get an idea of what the real outcome would be. But I think you described it pretty accurately. I mean, with AI, at least currently with the specialized AI, if you give it the same input, you'll get the same output. But the devil is in the details, because if you tweak the input even just by a little bit, it could give you a completely different result.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where the uncertainty comes in.
Like your same input is like something that looks exactly the same to you may not look exactly the same to the computer system, just due to the level of precision that the computer system can handle.
Right.
If you took two photos of the exact same scene, like 1 second after another, those photos may be effectively the same to you as a human being, but the computer will recognize that these are different photos.
And smart people have already used that fact to fool the AI, right? I think you've seen an example where a tank is being made to look like an apple, or vice versa, or something like that. It's basically, you take two pictures that are exactly the same. Let's say it's like a picture of a tank, and on the first picture is clearly identified as tank by the AI, but the second picture you kind of jiggle the pixels a little bit in a certain fashion. So to a human eye, it looks exactly like the first picture. It looks like a tank. You can barely tell any difference at all. Maybe some red is not as red, maybe some green is not as green, but it's still green, it's still red, it's still blue. It's still It's still the
Yeah.
same exact picture.
But ultimately, maybe some tank is not quite as tank.
Yeah, and so the problem is you give that, if you do it in just the right way and give that to the AI, it will recognize it as completely something else, like a chicken or something.
So that's a fascinating thing. I think when Alexei and I were at NIPS, now called NeurIPS, in 2017. NeurIPS is the leading AI conference in the world, and they focus mostly on deep learning, but generally on sort of probabilistic reasoning. And there was a presentation, I believe it was from Cornell, where they were showing how you could essentially place a sticker onto a tank, a small sticker, like a sticker that was like barely visible, but that sticker like agitated the AI in a way. It's called an adversarial approach. So you're trying to find out what is the like minimum way in which I could sort of provoke this AI to see something differently. And it was seeing tanks as toasters. That's what it was. So this is very real. This is very practical. You could imagine that if you are, an adversarial country, and you have tanks that you're amassing on the border of a country, like
or just toasters.
Or toasters. Let's say you're Russia and you're shipping all your large toasters down to the border of Ukraine, so that one day a soldier could fall asleep in his toaster and then wake up in the morning and just be like, whoa, I was sleeping at my toaster across the border. You could do that by painting your camouflage slightly differently, because there's certain small nuances and colors and patterns that these neural nets have been trained on to recognize a toaster versus a tank. And even though the object doesn't look anything like a toaster, there's ways to just kind of modulate it in slight ways to kind of like throw the classification just over the boundary to call it a toaster. And so if you're the United States and you're collecting satellite imagery, way more satellite imagery than you can look at in real time or even pseudo real time, right? You use AI to classify your activity, what you're seeing, and to throw up some alerts when you see bad stuff. So you can kind of imagine the American AI system running on top of our satellite imagery that's actively monitoring the Ukrainian border for Russian, tank movement, and it's not doing anything. It's just like a bunch of people are eating breakfast on the border.
It's the invasion of the toasters.
Invasion of the toasters. And like, you Ukrainians are toast. It's like,
why are these toasters shooting missiles?
How do these toasters fire artillery shells? Yeah, I mean, I think that's the very, very real implication. If you are a country that is attempting to take action, and you know that satellites are monitoring you, and you know that AI is analyzing that imagery because we don't have the bandwidth to do it real time with real people, paint your stuff different. I mean, it's so this is not hypothetical.
Well,
this is toasters all over the world.
Toaster warfare. Granted, it's a little bit of a contrived example, just because it's not that you can paint it just a little bit different. It has to be more or less a precise pattern if you want to throw the recognition off in a precise way. If you want to get that toaster effect, right, versus a tank versus like a missile battery or something like that. Because
yeah, absolutely.
So the effect is most pronounced in these examples that they gave us because they doctored it in just the right way. But yeah, it's still kind of alarming that can happen.
Yeah, it's slightly alarming. I think the key thing though, which is what Alexei is getting at, is that it's not that you couldn't paint the tank differently in a way that would be sort of unobservable to the human eye. I think you can do that and still trigger it to be a toaster. But what Alexei's getting at is that you have to know exactly how the neural network behind the AI that's classifying things as tanks is functioning, because it requires very, very specific permutations. And so that is one thing that I think is sort of at least a saving grace for like preventing world chaos, is that you do have to kind of reverse engineer how the neural network was trained. You have to understand what it's sensitive to, what pixels ultimately sort of are most impactful as it sees an image at making it being classified as a toaster versus a tank. And if you could identify what those pixels are and the color and the shape and how they sort of change that classification, that's when you can start to be very, very specific about how you camouflage.
There's also another, I think, sort of an apocryphal story about classifying tanks.
Uh-oh.
You've probably heard this, right? So
I don't know.
the military decided they wanted to train a neural network, or maybe it was even before the neural network, some algorithm to classify tanks in images. And so they went out there and took lots of images of tanks, and they trained the neural network, and the neural network worked, in their test examples, worked really well. It was like 95%, 99% recognition rate. So they were really excited about it. And they started giving it like real world images, and it was totally failing. So they really didn't understand why it was failing, but they dug a little bit deeper, and finally what they found out was that because they took the original images of tanks like during the 2 or 3 days that they were out shooting, it was overcast, it learned to pick up clouds as tanks.
Invasion of the clouds. We get bad weather coming.
Yeah. And so anytime there was, overcast weather, it thought it was a tank. But it had nothing to do with the tank itself, of course. It's just because all of the samples were from the exact same type of, day, overcast day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. And that's actually a fundamental, I think, challenge with AI. I mean, it's kind of like, honestly, like, you and I both have kids. It's kind of like, watching your kids learn about the world is kind of the way that AI functions. There's actually a very, very tight-knit analogy. It's like when our kids were young and we said, hey, that's a car, anything on wheels becomes a car, a motorcycle, a car, an SUV, a bus, a freaking boat on a trailer, all those things are cars. And that's because we told them something was a car, and they tried to generalize in a really interesting, compelling way. They said, you can imagine that their own internal, biological wet network was like, hey, what are the features that correspond to this thing my dad's pointing out to me? Like, it's not the clouds, I know that. And I don't see any toasters because I know what a toaster is. They all seem to have wheels. Like, that's probably what it is. And it's on a road. So if it has wheels and it's on a road, it's a car, right? And so, and then you have to show it other stuff to really differentiate beyond that. Then if you wanted to kind of understand the difference between a motorcycle and a car, you have to actively show it a motorcycle and be like, hey, that's a motorcycle. And they're like, no, that's a car. No, it's a motorcycle. That's a car. You're like, a motorcycle. You're like, and then they're like, you could see the wheels turning, right? It's like, well, how could that be? Oh, two wheels. Okay. And
you can see both the wheels turning.
You can see the wheels turning. You're like, you can see the wheels turning, son. It's a motorcycle. And he's like, wheels are turning. Must be a motorcycle. But that's the same way that neural networks work, and it's the same thing that you're getting at, right? It needs to see situations where there are not clouds to start learning that clouds are not the feature that it should be attending to recognize tanks.
And I think you have to differentiate between what previously was called AI, kind of where we started our episode with, versus what's now called AI, right? I mean, I'm glad you brought this example up with kids learning, because I saw the same kind of stuff, of course, with my kids. As they're growing up, they're classifying things and misclassifying things in some really hilarious ways. But it's very much more like the deep neural networks today than what AI was, even 10 years ago. Like,
yeah,
when that paper came out in 2012, I think, and they made a couple of breakthroughs on deep neural networks, and then they kind of everything cascaded from there. But the neural networks now actually scarily do a lot of very similar things that our kids do when they're young.
Yeah, you're right.
It's really, really cool to see, but also a little bit scary.
Yeah, the degree to which training a neural network and teaching a child are similar is almost kind of otherworldly. Like, I mean, I spend like my days, working on training networks, and then I come home and I teach my kids about stuff. And I mean, it's extremely similar, but obviously the kids have the generalized intelligence, and they don't need to see a million examples to learn the way machines often need sort of very large data sets. Although, I mean, that's changing too recently, but yeah, it is incredibly similar, kind of crazy way. So let me tell you a quick story, and then I'll jump into this question. So I was invited to give a talk to my son's kindergarten class last year, and I was going to go talk about careers and what I do. And I was go into the school, and I have a cafeteria full of like 100 kindergartners, and I'm just like, oh my God, what am I going to tell these kids about AI? Like, what are they going to understand, right? So I think one of the most challenging things to talk about is intelligence. So I started with that, and I said, hey, have you guys heard about artificial intelligence, AI? And they said, no, nobody raised their hand. Didn't expect that. I thought some of them would for sure, but nobody did. And then I said, okay, what about intelligence? Have you guys heard of intelligence? And of course, most of them raised their hand. Some didn't. I think that was a bit of a self-referential situation, when they didn't raise their hand, but most of them did. And then I said, okay, that's great. So what is intelligence? And then I got blank stares, sort of ironic. And so then I was like, okay, is a person intelligent? And they said, yeah, of course, a person's intelligent. And I said, okay, what about a dolphin? Is a dolphin intelligent? And they said, yeah, of course. I said, what about a monkey? And they said, yeah, of course, a monkey's intelligent. And I said, what about your dog? Is your dog intelligent? And, people said, of course, a dog is intelligent. And then I said, what about a worm? Is a worm intelligent? And nobody thought they were intelligent. Everyone said, no, worm's not intelligent. And then, I said, but a worm is going to, find its food in the world. Like, that's not easy. I mean, finding food is hard. Surviving is hard. How can a worm do that when he's not intelligent? So one of the kids raised his hand and he says, they're not intelligent because worms don't have eyes. I said, okay. So the criteria for intelligence is having eyes. And then I said, okay, that's a great answer. It is a great answer, right? I mean, they're thinking along the right path. But I said, what is it about having eyes that makes an animal intelligent? Why is that a threshold, right? And so then another kid raised their hand and said, well, because then he can see things. And I said, okay, sure. Like, so if an animal can sense, then he has intelligence. And then, of course, well, they need to think about things, right? So it was a really neat experience to get a group of 5-year-olds who had never heard of artificial intelligence, some who didn't even know what intelligence was, to like really draw a boundary, right? And I don't know that that's the right boundary to draw. I'm not sure that I think you can make arguments, in different ways to split it differently, but they intuitively had a boundary there. And as you walked down the animal, phylums, you at a point at which things were living, but not really intelligent in the eyes of kids. And so I thought that was a really fascinating experience to go through. So then I said to them, do you guys think it's possible that machines could be intelligent? And like all of them, all at once, were like, no, definitely not. That's impossible. and I was like, okay, interesting. So it's like, how many of you guys have an Amazon Alexa in your house? Like every hand went up, right? How many of you guys have ever talked to Siri on your parents' iPhone? Like every hand went up, right? So really fascinating, right? That there was like this ability for them to, understand what intelligence was intuitively, think it completely impossible for a machine to be intelligent. But then but then be daily interacting with intelligence all the time, and not really sort of being fully aware of it, So that was really neat. So I ended the talk by, explaining what I do in AI strategy and, trying to change the world. And I just told them, there's not going to be any jobs left when you guys graduate. Your parents will lose your jobs as well. So you're and no, I
It's a
actually
great motivational speech there.
I know. I was like, what kind of career advice do I give to kids when they are going to graduate into the world 13 years from now, when AI is going to dramatically change, the kinds of things that people do to add value to this world, which, adding value is, how you justify compensation, at least, at least at least in theory. I mean, if you work for the military or in government or other areas, maybe that's not quite quite such a direct linkage. But yeah, it was just like fascinating. So, I mean, I just kind of left it with like, hey, things that are predictable and repeatable and don't require creativity and innovation and deep thought are things that probably won't exist as careers when you guys graduate. Like machines will probably be doing those activities, not necessarily those jobs, but those activities. And so I said, try to study math, try to study science, try to focus on being creative and start preparing to welcome your robotic overlords.
That's what super intelligent AI will think. It's like, what? Humans are creative? Nah.
Well, so my question to you, given that story, is, what do you think? What do you think is going to happen with AI and jobs? I mean, I guess I'll semi-answer this and then hand it over to you. So I think that, with all my research, and this is sort of my day job, is to really be deep into this research so that we as a company and me as an expert can kind of get us ahead of that curve, right? So we don't go out of business. But I think that a lot of activities are going to be automated, not necessarily at the job level, but at the activity level. And that's going to result in like a shift in the kind of jobs we have or the way the jobs are structured. But I think there'll be very few jobs that just go away in the absolute. But I'm curious to get your thoughts. Like, what do you think is going to happen? Like, how is this going to unfold? And, maybe 5 or 10 years out, what would you say to somebody who's listening to this, who's maybe in school and wondering what they should study, or somebody who's maybe, mid-career and wondering if they're going to be out of a job, before they're ready to retire, but also before our robotic overlords, make working unnecessary.
Yeah, sorry guys, you're screwed.
Yeah, that's my advice is you're screwed,
Well, see, the way I think about it is like, if we did things perfectly, right, then there's this perfect world where things would work out really well. I mean, having that kind of power at our fingertips is amazing. It'd be super liberating, right? Imagine, I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast that I'm an armchair physicist. I'd love to spend my time working on physics or something else, devote my time to that. But I mean, I have like 1,000 different interests, but I can't because I have a day job, right? And I have to do things that always necessarily, the things that I enjoy doing just because I need to make a living, need to take care of my family. But, in the perfect world, yeah, if the AIs could take over most of those jobs and we had all the free time and the resources that the AIs would provide, we would engage in a lot more of these kinds of activities where, it's maybe not the routine kinds of driving a truck or whatever, but something that's a lot more rewarding, right, intrinsically. But that's not what's going to happen, right?
Cue the dystopian background music that we don't have. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, so clearly that's not what's going to happen. Yeah. I mean, what we've seen happen, lately is the accumulation of power through the automated processes and through AI. Sorry, in the hands of a few, right? And so that's kind of a little bit alarming.
Yeah,
I think back in the 40s, was it John Keynes? The famous economist, he predicted that by 1980 or something like by the end of the century, I think he said, we wouldn't need to work. He said, well, looking at the productivity now and then the productivity gains we're going to have by that point, we're going to be like 8 times as efficient as we were in 1940s. And he said, well, in 2000, we won't have to work anymore because, we'll be so productive everybody will have plenty.
But
Well,
actually, we I mean, in some sense, you know, maybe we're 8 times more efficient, but we're buying 8 times more crap.
okay, but sure, fine. But the thing is, actually, yeah, he was right. We're a lot more efficient than 8 times. We're like 20 times more efficient than we were in 1940.
Hmm, interesting.
But there's still plenty of people who are in poverty, right? Still plenty of people who don't have enough food every day on their table. So, we have
Yeah, yeah,
children who are suffering.
yeah,
So, that's kind of the the real version of what's going to happen. I think as AI develops, it's just such a powerful tool that just by our human nature will tend to, whoever can will tend
yeah,
to
yeah, absolutely,
um, gather it, or and use it to their benefit and potentially the
absolutely.
detriment of others. So that's kind of
Yeah,
the challenge there.
you'd think as a society, I mean, that we could be better than that. Like, I think certainly, like you and I as individuals, I think, would want to be better than that. I think like we would want everyone to have, you know, sort of on their Maslow hierarchy, the sort of the base levels of that pyramid, that food and safety and comfort and housing. We'd want that, right, before, you know, wealthy people get more wealthy, or before, wealthy corporations get more wealthy. Um, and I guess, unfortunately, greed is still there. War is still there. We're just going to have more powerful weapons and better leverage.
Yep.
to Yeah, yeah, that's true. I've noticed that there's been like an explosion of sort of like dystopian sci-fi AI movies, like on Netflix
Wonder why.
and like, I know it's really fascinating because, like, I mean, like, it just seems like when you go on Netflix these days, like, and I don't really watch a lot of TV, but when I do go on Netflix and I look, it's like incredible, like the percentage of programs that really are like creative people attempting to like really like call out like all the sort of like bad ways in which technology could go astray. Like, I don't remember that always being the case. Like, when I first started studying AI, like almost 20 years ago, I mean, I don't remember this like, density of like dystopian, creative works that were like really looking to see like how things can go bad. There's just been this like plethora of like dystopian movies that have really come out recently, like with like really creative people that are imagining all the different ways in which technology can go bad. And I mean, that frequently focuses on AI, even if it's not directly on AI. It's social media, it's things that are enabled by AI, right? And if not directly AI, and I just don't remember that always being the case. Like, it seems like, in addition to, us being focused on AI in our careers and sort of the hype that's come around AI recently, like society is getting caught up in this too. And some of the hype is wrong, and some of the movies are, over the top, but in general, it's incredible how focused society is on looking for these dystopian, things. And I mean, it really makes sense too, because I mean, um, you know AI is going to be this offset for our society, the way that electricity was, more so than the way electricity was, right? I think it's going to be this just foundational thing, and the rate of progress is exponential. And that's sort of what you were talking about, I think, too, in terms of like the risk to, society, like the poor to get poorer, the rich to get richer, us not seeing the benefits of productivity. It's like, to kind of think about this exponential growth. Imagine, we're running a race, and every step I take, I get faster. I don't just cover more ground, but I actually run faster. And so if I've got a 5-step head start, initially it's just 5 steps, but then it's 6 steps and 7 steps. But my rate of speed is increasing faster than your rate of speed. So that 5-step gap, if we run long enough, is going to start to approach on almost like an infinite gap between us. And that's the real scary thing, that like if one company or one country or one group of people, continue to dominate in AI and continue to grow exponentially, the people that are further behind, they're not just going to stay 5 years behind or 10 years behind. They're gonna very quickly become sort of, infinitely behind to the point that they can never catch up because of that exponential growth rate. Like that's kind of what I think like Elon Musk was attempting to disrupt with his open AI company, right? He like I think the idea behind that was we're gonna lead AI. We're gonna be the cutting edge AI researchers and developers, but then we're gonna release it to the world at large so that no one really does get 5 steps ahead on this exponential curve.
Yeah, and then he took the leading AI researcher and put him on Tesla. To screw all the
Well,
people.
okay. In fairness, nobody's going to be 5 steps ahead except for Tesla.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to do good, but
Yeah.
then I saw Tesla.
I wanted to do good, but evil. So appealing. And we've got cookies.
I think everything starts out with good intentions, right? Like most things.
Most things, yeah.
Everything starts out with, but then it somehow gets twisted in the end. So kind of
yeah. Like when we were
there.
Yeah, like when I was doing defense work, or when we were doing defense work, and we were trying to build AI, and we really started off with the best intentions. Like it was like, how could we kill people better? It was like really just trying to do the best for the world, and then it always went downhill from there. I'm just kidding. I'm trying to be funny, and I'm not sure if I'm kidding, but trying to be funny. But yeah, you're right. I think people do start with the best. Like lots of people start with good intentions, if not everyone, and that is a risk. So what I find bewildering is like some people have this belief that our biological existence as it is now, human level intellect is sort of a transient state in the evolution of intelligent life on Earth. And if you imagine,
are you one of those transhumanists?
I might be. I at least think it's compelling and worth thinking about to the degree to the degree that humans can think about it currently. So yeah, transhumanism. So if you guys don't know, transhumanism is not about trans or humanism. It's about it's about this idea that like evolution of intelligence on Earth has happened biologically up until now. I would say somewhat naturally up until now. You could probably find some edge cases where it hasn't happened naturally, but largely it's happened naturally, especially at human level intellect. And transhumanism really argues that that our current human form, our current biological intelligence state is kind of a transient state, and that ultimately we will invent AI that's going to be smart enough that it's going to invent smarter AI, kind of the super duper, ultra super duper type path, right? Where ultimately that AI is going to become the dominant life form. I don't know if I should call it a life form, but it's going to become the dominant intelligence on Earth. And at some point, humans as we know them, may cease to exist. I mean, either through some conflict with ourselves or some conflict with the AI, or just naturally, right? Like no species has survived forever. Homo sapiens, is not going to persist forever. That's never happened before in the history of Earth. There will be a point in which Homo sapiens become extinct because all species become extinct, right?
You know what they say. I intend to live forever. So far, so good.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, I think that's actually the fallacy, right? Like we as people, I think we tend to think of ourselves as like unique and distinct from the physical environment in which we live, and we tend to think of ourselves as sort of stable and always present. But I mean, humans, Homo sapiens, as we are today, like has only really existed for maybe 100,000 years at most, and prior to that, there were other species that were human-like. They were the predecessors. I would even go so far as to make the statement that they were our aboriginal progenitors. I read that once in an anthropology book, and it stuck with me. But I love that. It just seems so over the top, But yeah, I mean, so at some point, either through conflict or through nature, humans won't exist anymore. But a truly intelligent AI that has intelligence, that it's improving incrementally, that eventually approaches on sort of the most intelligent thing that could possibly exist in the universe, is going to persist. And so transhumanism is this idea that post humans, intelligence will persist, and it will embody our sort of way of seeing the world. Potentially, it will embody, the we will have imbued our perspective of intelligence into this system. We will potentially have even created conscious entities that are conscious in in a way that they're modeled after our consciousness, right? So some people go ahead.
I was going to say, little do they know that we're all just a simulation, and some alien will just like trip over a power cord somewhere, and the computer will shut down.
Yeah, for sure. Is this your trans universe theory? Oh my God. Simulations. I think we can do an entire podcast on that. So
we'll have to revisit that another day.
Yeah. So tune into the future, and we'll invite Alexei back to our podcast, and we'll talk about how we're all living in simulations, which are inside of simulations,
Just simulations all the way down.
I know. It used to be turtles. It used to be turtles all the way down, and now I've sadly replaced turtles with simulations.
Well, the turtles were simulated.
Yeah, simulated turtles. What about Apollo? It could have been Apollo all the way down. Wasn't Apollo the Greek god that held the earth on his shoulders?
Something like that.
He's one of my favorite
Haven't
gods.
brushed up on my Greek mythology.
It was
the Atlantans.
Atlantans?
Whatever they're called.
People that live in Georgia?
I forgot. Yeah. all of them.
The Atlantans. Or maybe the people of Terminus. or Marthasville. Wasn't Atlanta called Terminus at some point? And then before that, Marthasville?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. It hasn't always been like the ATL, Hotlanta. Before it was like Hot Terminus. And then it was Hot Marthasville. Oh, God. Yeah, cool. All right. So I feel like there's a lot more we could talk about, and we could keep going, but maybe it's worth just kind of like saying a few things and kind of wrapping this up here. And then, we'll save a lot of other topics for future podcasts. And so, Alexei, let me give you the stage to talk about anything you want to talk about that we haven't talked about yet, or any last words you want to throw out there.
Sure. Well, we talked a little bit about the future, and I think it's going to be quite interesting. I think something that's on my mind is that when you consider the amount of change that amount of disruption, I should say, that AI will bring into the world, it's going to be unprecedented. It might pretty much rupture our social fabric, right?
Oh, yeah.
The internet's changed our social fabric. Now, we go on Facebook, we text, we do all the things we've never done before.
We podcast.
The AI might actually, we podcast, but the AI might actually rupture it because it would produce such gigantic societal changes in such a short period of time that our society has never seen this before, never experienced this before. So
yeah,
that's kind of what worries me most, is that when these technologies come about, they're going to be so powerful that it'll create a lot of conflict. Who knows? Maybe even nuclear conflict. Maybe that's how every civilization wipes itself out.
Yeah. Well, I think that's fascinating, and I think that's a great way to end this. I think the technology is going to come faster than our cultural and societal and legal and government structure is really prepared for, right? And so,
yeah.
So I think what you're really saying too is like, we're never really going to get ahead of this curve fully, but you kind of have to raise the alarm and really, we all have to, as stewards of our society and as, trying to be good people and kind to one another and looking out for one another, we have to really drive those discussions in a grounded, like non-hype, non-panicked, non-anti-science, anti-technology way to really try to drive to the society we want, rather than like ending up in one of these Netflix dystopian movies. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. It was a lot of fun for me and for us to talk through all these different thoughts that we have often on a daily basis, and we just really wanted to share them with a broader set of people that maybe aren't sort of thinking about these things on a daily basis, or maybe you guys are, and that's why you want to tune into this podcast. So definitely we'll have Alexei on again, and we'll walk through a bunch of other topics, such as a deep dive into physics and simulations and black holes, deep dive into futurism. What does the future look like? We'll talk about genetics, CRISPR, and sort of ways in which we see the world, I think, as technology thought leaders, and also maybe as contrarians. So Alexei and I will cover all that kind of stuff, and I will be looking to get other guests on as well. And so thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it.